5:17 a.m. The ship's steel sweats with Caribbean mist as Condition 3 echoes through the passageways. On the bridge, red rig floods the consoles. In CIC, a half-moon of scopes wakes at once. 14 nautical miles off the Venezuelan coast, close enough to taste politics, far enough to stand on law, USS gravely steadies her heartbeat. 3 returns knifing in from the west, tight wedge, the kind of geometry that says, this is not a fisherman's accident. The sea isn't angry, it's calculating. Boots thump the deck like a ritual older than any flag. A helmsman's knuckles whiten. The watch officer's voice stays level. No one shouts. The destroyer doesn't flinch. This is not a bar fight. It's a test can discipline outmuscle adrenaline when 2 flags stare across a narrow ribbon of water. Can visible strength guns, uncovered sensors awake, speak louder than a single reckless shot? Don't just watch, engage. If clear-eyed military analysis matters to you, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your voice fuels our mission to deliver truth beneath the headlines. 5:17 a.m. The ship is already awake. Condition 3 rolls off the 1MC, and the bridge answers with economy headings verified, sea room, preserved lookouts doubled. CIC paints 3 fast movers sliding in from the west, disciplined spacing, steady closure. It's a legal position with political glare. The officer of the deck, OOD, orders standardized hails on VHF in English and Spanish. No dramatics, no edge in the tone, just the measured cadence that carries confidence across salt air. At 5:19 a.m., the MH-60R Seahawk breaks free rotor downwash, stippling the water as the helo climbs into a conservative orbit. The crew lights up the EO/IR turret. A wide racetrack pattern establishes an eye in the sky everyone can see. Not menacing, just watching, recording, and telling the world we're present, we're professional, and we're awake. The contacts push through 8 nautical miles, then 5 on the starboard quarter. On USS, gravely visible posture comes online. The 5-inch 62 Mk-45 is trained outboard. Turret doors open. Phalanx CIWS sits awake and unmistakable. Bridge wings are manned. Comms between bridge and CIC are crisp-clipped and routine. On the AN/SPY-1D screen, their wakes look bright and busy, but no fire control solution is taken. Restraint isn't hesitation, it's doctrine. Hails continue. U.S. Navy warship conducting lawful operations in international waters. Maintain course and speed. Do not cross our bow. Seconds stretch. A reply finally comes, rough, assertive, but not reckless. The formation holds. The OOD recomputes CPA. CIC calls the new range 3.6 nautical miles abeam to starboard. That's close enough to taste the wake. The helmsman preserves sea room, avoiding any move that compresses angles or invites a collision narrative. The Seahawk slides higher. The camera gaze is steady. No siren, no warning shot. Just geometry, angles, speed, posture, and the unmistakable fact of a U.S. Navy destroyer that will not be baited. At 5:34 a.m., the formation loosens. 1 contact drifts aft. The other 2 match. Speeds fall. Wakes flatten. They turn away in a controlled peel, neither fleeing nor pressing, the universal language of "we've made our point." USS gravely logs the timeline, records the tapes, and holds station. The sea returns to its ordinary pulse, and everyone on watch understands deterrence just worked in the open. The Southern Caribbean is not just blue water and trade winds, it's a crowded chessboard where law, pride, and profit rub elbows. Smuggling lines crisscross these seas like faint contrails, fuel out narcotics and contraband in people, and influence both ways. When a U.S. Navy destroyer holds station roughly 14 nautical miles off the Venezuelan coast, she's inside a lane most of the planet recognizes beyond the 12 nautical mile territorial sea, within the contiguous zone out to 24 nautical miles, and well inside the broader exclusive economic zone, EEZ, where resource rights don't erase navigation freedoms. These distinctions matter to an older American audience that remembers why rules at sea exist, so ships don't collide and nations don't stumble into wars they never meant to fight. In this neighborhood, narratives compete as fiercely as radar beams. A coastal ministry may talk up an elastic security belt for a domestic audience, but customary practice still leans on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea UNCLOS, Framework observed in behavior whether or not every Senate has ratified it. The rule of thumb ships in international waters may pass. Observe and conduct lawful operations so long as they avoid acts like interfering with commerce or aggressive close-in ISR that any reasonable mariner would deem hostile. It's a lane for discipline, not for swagger. Now layer in geography. The ABC Islands, Aruba, Bonaire, Curaçao, sit just off South America under the Kingdom of the Netherlands. That creates a lattice of quiet cooperation. Dutch authorities, island police, and Coast Guards linking with U.S. Southern Command Southcom tasking and occasional U.S. Coast Guard detachments. In practice, that means shared maritime air patrols, shore-based radar feeds, and coordinated interdictions. None of it makes splashy headlines. All of it shapes behavior at sea. For a fast boat crew sprinting out of a mainland port, the knowledge that Allied eyes are recording from multiple angles changes the calculus. You're not performing for your own camera anymore. That's why posture without provocation is the coin of the realm. When USS Gravely shows her guns but doesn't lock them, when an MH-60R circles high enough to watch but not to crowd, the ship is speaking a language that coastal state smugglers and allies all understand. The message is simple. The rules are the rules. We will keep them, and we'll make sure everyone sees we kept them. In gray water, that's how you stay out of the red. Deterrence at sea is often mistaken for volume. More ships, louder voices, harder turns. In reality, the American playbook in contested littorals reads more like chamber music than heavy metal. The score is rules of engagement, ROE. The tempo is restraint, and the goal is to make escalation mathematically unattractive. That's why a destroyer like USS Gravely balances three imperatives: stay legal, stay legible, stay lethal, without advertising the last part. Staying legal begins with geography and paperwork. Operating at roughly 14 nautical miles isn't a dare. It's a demonstration. It says we know where the 12 nautical mile line is, we respect it, and we won't be shoved back by invented belts that have no standing in customary practice. The watch team's cadence on VRHF isn't just courtesy, it's evidence. Every hail, every time-stamped course change, every clipped acknowledgement becomes a paper trail moving up to Southcom, out to allies, and forward to diplomats when headlines get noisy. Staying legible is about visuals and predictability. The moment the 5-inch turret comes out of battery and the phalanx CIWS is plainly in view, the ship is speaking to multiple audiences. To nearby patrol crews, we're alert. To smugglers who might piggyback on chaos, try another day. To partners on the ABC Islands under the Kingdom of the Netherlands, we're playing by the book. Your reputation is safe alongside ours. Legibility is altitude too. An MH-60R Seahawk at a measured orbit broadcasts that surveillance is active and recorded without the kind of swooping pass that turns dignity into grievance. Staying lethal is the quiet pillar. It lives in firing solutions. The ship chooses not to take in electronic countermeasures. It doesn't energize, and in layered responses held in reserve. Silence can be strategic. In the age of the 10-second clip, the side that looks measured tends to own the replay. A near miss can be replayed 1,000 times. A near mistake will be replayed 1,000,000. All of this feeds the larger fight narrative control. Coastal governments frame incidents as incursions. Great powers counter with law and logs. The winning frame persuades the uncommitted middle, the island governments, regional bodies, commercial shippers, that one side is dependable and the other capricious. Here, American discipline isn't just virtue, it's influence. It reassures insurers and traders that sea lanes won't become coin tosses. It signals to allies that joint patrols won't end in diplomatic triage. And it reminds fastboat crews that showmanship is not a strategy. In the Caribbean gray zone, success often looks like nothing happening. No collisions, no warning shots, no fuel slick headlines forcing foreign ministers to cancel their weekends. When USS Gravely logs each exchange and keeps station without flinching, it models a kind of power older American viewers know by instinct, the power to absorb friction without feeding it. That steadiness travels by radio, by rumor, and by the quiet respect of professionals on every bridge within radar range, shaping tomorrow's decisions long after today's wakes have flattened. A standoff like this doesn't hinge on bravado. It runs on architecture. USS Gravely is an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer which means the ship's nervous system is Aegis, a fusion of sensors, weapons, networks, and doctrine that turns chaos into choreography. The heart of it is AN SPY 1D, a phased array workhorse that watches sky and sea at once. It doesn't blink, it doesn't swivel, and it doesn't miss the small stuff for the big stuff. When three fast contacts knuckle the water and sprint inbound, SPY 1D renders not just dots but behavior speed curves, formation discipline, and the subtle tells that separate fishermen from a deliberate probe. Behind the screen, CIC is the brainstem. The Team Tactical Action Officer, TAO, Anti-Air Warfare Coordinator, Surface Warfare Coordinator, Air Controller runs a tight call and response loop. Every track gets an identity hypothesis. Every hypothesis gets a plan. Every plan is checked against ROE. The OOD on the bridge and the TAO and CIC are two hands on one wheel. Bridge owns the ship's body course speed separation. CIC owns the picture, what's out there, what it's doing, and what it might do in 60 seconds. Firepower is layered. Outboard and unmistakable, the 5-inch for 62 Mk45 offers precision warning and, if needed, decisive punches at range. Closer in the white dome of Phalanx, CIWS watches like a coiled spring autonomous, brutally fast, the last-ditch word in survival, against something reckless and close. The M38 mount adds stabilized crew-serve precision at the don't cross this line band. None of these systems needs to bark to make a point. Simply being awake and visible changes the calculus for anyone closing too fast. Soft power rides on electrons. SLQ-32V3 sniffs for emissions and deception mapping, who's listening and who's talking. Link 16 ties U.S. Gravely to a wider net airborne patrols Allied radars on the ABC Islands and any partnership in range, so the picture on this destroyer's scopes is often bigger than the horizon suggests. That connectivity enables quiet confidence. You don't have to prove you can win the moment if you're already winning the situation. Finally, there's the human machine. A bridge wing lookout marking bearings out loud, a Seahawk aircrew keeping the lens steady, a CIC supervisor with a finger on the net. Three kinds of eyes: human, electro-optical, and radar. When they agree, the ship acts. When they disagree, the ship slows down its decision without yielding an inch of authority. That is the quiet edge of a U.S. Navy DDG, disciplined readiness that convinces long before it compels. If that is the orchestra USS Gravely already conducts, the fleet is composing tomorrow's score. Start with sensors. The AN SPY-6 family, rolling out across newer hulls, doesn't just see farther, it sees clearer. Built as scalable radar modules, SPY-6 sharpens the waterline picture. Small, fast, low RCS targets that once sat on the edge of certainty now come into focus earlier and stay coherent longer. Paired with Aegis Baseline 10, that fidelity becomes decision time, more seconds to sort, intent, more feet of sea room, preserved, more chances to choose posture over panic. Even if U.S. Gravely sails with SPY-1D anchoring the narration, with SPY-6 as the yardstick communicates overmatch, this Navy is moving forward, not treading water. Extend the horizon with unmanned eyes. The MQ-8C Fire Scout isn't cinematic. That's the virtue. It launches without fanfare, loiters for hours, and feeds steady EO/IR video and surface search radar back to the ship in the net. In a gray zone approach, a Fire Scout lets commanders hold the manned MH-60R higher and friendlier, while the unmanned platform does the close-in cataloging. Track additional fast craft staging beyond the first trio, or watch the inlet they came from to see if a second wave is forming. That's escalation control by persistence, not by volume. Add the electronic soft edge. CWIP Block 3 AN SLQ-32V7 pushes the SLQ-32 lineage into non-kinetic influence, detect, classify, and if directed, shape what the other side sees and hears without crossing into overt aggression. Pair that with non-lethal dazzlers, portable LAWS emitters, and stabilized mounts like Mk38 Mod 4 with top light EO/IR, and you gain rungs between voice and violence, a flash of green that says "we see you," an EO track box the other crew knows is fixed to them, a beam that discourages reckless closure without leaving holes in hulls. Connectivity turns ship tricks into fleet truth. Link 16 and cooperative engagement capability. CEC stitched the destroyer to partners in real-time Dutch sensors ashore, On the ABC Islands, a U.S. Coast Guard cutter pacing an interdiction lane, or a maritime patrol aircraft running a mid-altitude racetrack. The result is narrative insurance. When a coastal ministry later claims harassment or incursion, there aren't just logs from one U.S. Navy hull. There are synchronized tracks and timestamps from multiple sovereign sources under the Kingdom of the Netherlands umbrella and Southcom tasking. Disputes shrink when facts are shared. For an older American audience that has watched the seas change since the Cold War, the power on display here isn't just steel and tonnage, it's constitutional. Restraint is not softness, it's strategy. When USS Gravely holds firm outside 12 nautical miles, answers on VHF in 2 languages, and keeps weapons visible but uncommitted, the ship exercises authority that doesn't need to shout. The message to every wheelhouse within radar range: the U.S. Navy can dominate the battle space without dominating the news cycle. Modern deterrence is an accounting exercise. What does an opponent gain by pressing closer? A TV clip, perhaps, but at the price of facing a destroyer whose watch teams have rehearsed this geometry 100 times. On the American ledger, the upside of patience is enormous. Southcom gets a clean factual record, timestamps, bearings, hails that can be pushed to allies and diplomats. Any later claim of harassment runs aground on ship logs and aircrew video. At the human level, restraint preserves a crew's moral bearing. It keeps faith with the idea that American power is most persuasive when it is most controlled. There's veteran wisdom at work. You don't win by letting adrenaline pick the next move. The pairing of bridge and CICOD managing course and separation, while the TAO manages threats and options, keeps mind and muscle in balance. Visible posture signals resolve. Withheld triggers signal judgment. Together they communicate something a fast boat crew can feel in their bones: this destroyer won't be baited. Strategically, restraint buys influence. Commercial shippers, insurers, and regional authorities notice when a great power plays by the book. So do would-be provocateurs. The more predictable and lawful the American response, the more dangerous it becomes, because it denies the other side the chaos they need to manufacture grievance. It also sets a floor for future incidents. Everyone knows the rules because they watch the rules enforced in daylight. Incidents at sea seldom involve only 2 flags. The audience includes the Kingdom of the Netherlands through Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao regional bodies like the Organization of American States (OAS), the U.S. Coast Guard commercial shipping interests, and a row of governments that prefer rules to surprises. Each reads the same telemetry and draws lessons that shape tomorrow's patrols. For the Dutch Caribbean, predictability is prosperity. Tourism, bunkering, and air-sea logistics depend on waters that feel professionally managed. When USS Gravely keeps station lawfully and responds on script, it reassures island officials that joint activities, shared radar feeds, coordinated interdictions, cross-deck liaison won't drag them into headline crises. It also strengthens quiet ties. Dutch maritime patrol aircraft, shore sensors, and police units can cooperate with confidence, knowing the American playbook values de-escalation and documentation. For regional democracies, the calculus is subtler. Many balance public sympathy for sovereignty, rhetoric with private anxiety about smuggling networks and armed groups at sea. What they want from Washington is steadiness. A measured U.S. Navy presence signals that lawful shipping lanes will be protected without igniting nationalist flare-ups. The OAS notices when tensions dissolve without sirens, and so do port authorities deciding where to invest. Commercial actors read the tape coldly. Insurers price risk. Ship operators set routes. A pattern of professional interactions, no collisions, no warning shots, no contested casualty claims, keeps premiums down and lanes open. The opposite, showy brinkmanship, forces detours and raises costs for everyone, including coastlines, hoping for jobs and customs revenue. In that sense, a quiet peel-off at 5:34 a.m. is not just a tactical outcome. It's a micro-signal to a global market that the Caribbean remains governable. Adversaries and fence-sitters watch too. They see a destroyer that could escalate at will but doesn't. They see allied eyes, Dutch, American, and U.S. Coast Guard sharing a synchronized picture that's hard to spin after the fact. And they see the downside of manufactured heroics, a fastboat dash that ends in an orderly disengagement archived on multiple sovereign hard drives. The lesson spreads by rumor and replay: perform if you must, but you won't rewrite physics or paperwork. Diplomatically, the aftermath is nearly as important as the morning itself. Because the record is clean, embassies work the phones, naval attachés reaffirm coal regs and standard hailing practices, and ministers can claim truthfully that no one blinked and no one blundered. The region gets what it needs: security with dignity, order, without humiliation, and a shared understanding that tomorrow's patrol will look like today's: professional, predictable, and boring in the best possible way. In the end, what didn't happen is the headline. No collisions to litigate, no warning shots to inflame talk shows, no funerals to harden positions. What did happen is the victory of procedure. USS Gravely stood on law, showed resolve, and let the geometry of good seamanship do the talking. For coastal communities, that means safer lanes and fewer shocks to local economies. For the United States, it means deterrence earned the hard way through discipline while preserving freedom of action for whatever comes next. Risks remain. Gray zone actors adapt. A future past could be messier, faster, or staged for viral effect. That's why the upgrades and habits we've discussed: clearer sensors, unmanned endurance, non-lethal rungs, allied connectivity matter. They buy seconds and options, the coin of survival when egos run hot on a narrow sea. Bring it home. Do you believe the true measure of American sea power is control, not spectacle? Should the fleet lean harder into non-lethal tools and allied links to keep these waters calm? Tell me below. If you value analysis anchored in real doctrine, not rumor, tap like, subscribe, and share this with someone who follows maritime security. The next incident is coming. The question is whether it becomes a crisis or another quiet win.